Hello and welcome. Please take a seat, get cozy, and enjoy a cup of terror. With me, Stephanie Valentine. Hello, my spooky little pumpkins. How are you? I hope you are keeping well. Thank you for joining me today. If you are new here, A Cup of Terror is a series where I talk about true crime cases, mainly Victorian and historical, murder and true crime, or cases that have a dash of the strange, be that supernatural, or to do with the occult, or just something downright odd. So, I've got my tea, my Star Trek mug, tea, Earl Grey, hot. Except it's not Earl Grey, it's just normal tea. And I've got my little friend, okay, so this little guy here, I'm so attached to him. He's starting to get a little bit he's not squishy, but I can see there's a few spots of mold that I know is going to take over. I'm really sad. He's lasted 6 months though, so I love this little dude so much. I'm really sad that it might be nearing the end of his life. Oh, okay. Enough silliness with my cute little pumpkin friend. Let's get into today's story. This is more of a legend than a true story, but I found it fascinating and I really wanted to do a video on it, so here we are. The story of Moll Dyer is a folktale that's been passed down for centuries. Moll Dyer was a resident of what was then called Seymourtown, now Leonardtown, in Maryland, in the United States of America. I will refer to the town as Leonardtown to avoid confusing myself. There isn't a known definite date for when the events occurred, but it's thought to have taken place during February of 1697 or 1698. The small town of Leonardtown was suffering. There was a deadly epidemic spreading through the community, most likely influenza, and the crops were dying. Several herds of sheep and cattle also died. That winter was particularly harsh, very cold. Many were starving, many were dying from disease, and most were worried about making it through the season. And when folks are suffering, worried about disease or starving to death, what do? They look for a scapegoat to explain why they're going through these hardships and to blame all their problems on that scapegoat. And as we've seen so often throughout history, they almost always turn to superstition. The people of Leonardtown blamed it on, you guessed it, witchcraft. The community gathered to discuss who the possible witch could be. A name came up, Moll Dyer. Unfortunately, Moll Dyer was a very easy target for the folks of Leonardtown. She was an older woman who lived on the edge of the town. She was poor and she lived a solitary life. She was often seen begging and foraging in the woods and was said to have some herbal knowledge. That sort of behaviour was apparently suspicious enough for the community to accuse her of being the cause of all their misfortunes. The town claimed that Moll Dyer had called upon the devil to terrorise the people of Leonardtown. The people of the town, they were getting more and more angry, completely believing these claims that they had they'd just come up with it, they'd made them up. And a mob came together with the aim of running her out of town. They surrounded her small, ramshackle hut in the woods just south of the town, and they set fire to it. Moll managed to escape and she ran into the woods. Some say that she saw the mob approaching and fled, with only enough time to grab a light shawl for warmth. Regardless of which version was true, she escaped and ran for miles until she collapsed from exhaustion. Like I said, that winter was a bitterly cold and harsh one. Moll Dyer was outside at night with only a light layer of clothing on and bare feet. She knew she wouldn't survive the night. She found a boulder and she placed her right hand upon it. She then raised her left hand to the moon and cursed the people of Leonardtown. Days later, her body was found by a young boy searching for lost cattle in the snow, frozen to death, still kneeling on the stone, her hand still held up towards the sky. The curse that she uttered tends to vary depending on who you ask, but generally it's the usual sort of thing: failing crops, infertility, bad luck, that sort of thing. Apparently for years after her death, the crops continued to fail, and the area continued to experience tragedies and difficulties. Apparently, you can also still see the imprint of her hand and knees on the stone. Mary rested on the boulder before she died, leaving indentations behind. This big rock was lost for centuries until 1968. Philip H. Love was a writer for the Washington Evening Star, and he read about the legend and he wanted to find the rock. A grocer who lived nearby claimed to know about the rock and took him to it, and it was at the edge of a ravine. In 1972, the rock was lifted and moved in front of the Leonardtown courthouse. It sat there for decades until in 2021 it was relocated to the grounds of Tudor Hall, where the Historical Society has its headquarters, and it's now properly looked after. People who have touched the stone have allegedly felt nauseous or dizzy and very uncomfortable. It is said to bring illness and misfortune to one's family if you touch it. Cameras used near the stone have reportedly malfunctioned. Her spirit is said to still haunt the land surrounding Leonardtown, looking for the men who forced her from her home. Moll Dyer Road, which is said to be the site of either where she lived or where she died, has seen quite a bit of supernatural activity. There have been strange sightings of strange fog, shadow people, will-o'-the-wisps, and lightning strikes. On the coldest nights of the year, a woman with long white hair in a white dress has been seen walking through the fields and woods near the town, followed by a white dog. The real identity of Moll Dyer is still unknown. Many think that she could have been a woman named Mary Dyer, who was born in Devon, England, in 1634. This Mary Dyer first shows up in records in 1669 when she sailed to the West Indies and spent 8 years as an indentured servant on St. Kitts. Indentured servitude is a contract where individuals will work for free, normally over several years. This agreement would normally be to repay debts or as an apprenticeship, and later it was often used as a way for a person to pay for passage to America. So this Mary Dyer may have entered into indentured servitude in exchange for getting her over there. In 1677, Mary Dyer then travelled to Dorchester, Maryland by ship. There's no records to show whether she stayed in Maryland though, or if she moved on elsewhere. There are no concrete sources, no records, no evidence, no documents that prove that the events actually happened, but many records in that period of Leonardtown's history don't exist anymore because many were lost in a fire that destroyed the town courthouse on the 8th of May 1831. There are a couple of details which, according to some people, prove that this could be more than just a folk tale. First of all, in the late 1600s, Moll was a nickname for Mary and also for any female name beginning with the letter M. And in October 1677, on a ship that was destined for Maryland, immigration records show that there was a Mary Dyer, the same Mary I mentioned earlier, who was born in England, and there was also a Marge Dyer and a Malago Dyers. So could one of those ladies be the legendary Moll Dyer? Secondly, there was a great epidemic that occurred in southern Maryland in 1697-1698. As with all folk tales, there are many variations and differences when it comes to this particular legend. Whilst some think that she came from England, many others think that she was born in Ireland, some think she was born in Kentucky, others New England. Apparently, some think that she was a spinster, others say that she was a noblewoman, others say she was the mother of 2 sons. All of these variations are common when it comes to tales that have been passed down orally and when there's no concrete written evidence. As far as I could tell, there's no definite historical record of the existence of Moll Dyer. I might be wrong, but there are those that say that yes, she definitely existed. She was a real person. Over the centuries since her death, Moll Dyer has attracted a lot of interest, and she's become part of the local folklore. There have been numerous books written about her. There's a local ballet based on her. There are several Moll Dyer songs and even a whiskey. Apparently, Moll Dyer was one of the historical figures that inspired the famous horror movie, The Blair Witch Project. Once again, though, we see an innocent woman becoming the victim of superstition, ignorance, fear, desperation, and suffering the deadly consequences. All she did was to live a different life to those in the town. She ticks all the boxes for a victim of witchcraft superstitions. She was a woman, she was older, she was unmarried, she was poor, she was a bit odd. And back then, that was often enough to ensure your death, unfortunately. Did she really curse the town and its people? Not likely. The misfortunes they continued suffering with after her death were either just coincidences or a result of their own guilt, perhaps subconsciously believing that they deserved the curse, for they had caused her death. In 2021, Leonardtown's mayor declared the 26th of February as Moll Dyer Day to honour her memory and to also bring attention to the harmful effects of bullying. Apparently, the ongoing theme of Moll Dyer Day is Be Kind, which is very fitting. Thank you for hanging out with me today and spending time watching this. I really appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a like, subscribe to my channel if you haven't already, and I do have a second channel where I'm posting convention vlogs and horror movie reviews, so subscribe to that channel as well if you like that sort of thing. But it's a goodbye from me for now, and join me next time for another Cup of Terror.